The dirt-streaked woman outside the Silver Dollar Tavern in Oatman, Arizona territory, looked like she had not eaten in days. Her trembling hands extended toward passing miners and cowboys who brushed past her without a second glance on that scorching afternoon in July of 1881. Xander Ives had just finished a cattle drive from Texas, his pockets heavy with 3 months' wages and his body aching for a hot meal and a cold beer. He was 24 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work under the sun, his dark hair needing a cut and his jaw shadowed with stubble. The journey had been brutal, losing 2 men to a stampede near the New Mexico border and nearly losing the entire herd to rustlers outside of Tucson. But they had made it, and now Xander wanted nothing more than to forget the trail dust and the nightmares. Then he saw her. She was sitting against the weathered wooden wall of the tavern, her dress torn and faded to a color that might have once been blue. Her blonde hair hung in tangled waves around a face so thin it made his chest tighten. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were green, the color of spring grass, and they held a quiet dignity despite her circumstances. She was not calling out or making a spectacle. She simply sat there with her palm open, hoping for mercy. Xander changed direction without thinking, his boots kicking up dust as he approached her. She looked up at him with those remarkable eyes, and he saw her flinch slightly, as if expecting a blow or harsh words. Instead, he crouched down to her level. "When did you last eat?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, raw from days of shouting orders over thundering hooves. She blinked, clearly surprised that anyone had stopped to speak to her. "2 days ago. A woman gave me half a biscuit." Her voice was soft, educated even, which struck him as unusual. This was no common drifter. Something had happened to bring her to this desperate state. "Come on." He stood and extended his hand. She stared at it as if it might disappear. "I have no money to pay you." "Did I ask for money?" He kept his hand steady, waiting. After a long moment, she placed her thin fingers in his palm. Her hand was ice cold despite the summer heat. Xander pulled her to her feet, noting how she swayed slightly, weak from hunger. Without a word, he guided her into the tavern, his hand at her elbow to keep her steady. The Silver Dollar was packed with miners fresh from the nearby gold claims, their voices loud and their laughter louder. The smell of whiskey and tobacco smoke hung thick in the air. Heads turned as Xander led the woman to a corner table, and he heard the whispers start immediately. He ignored them all, pulling out a chair for her. "Sit. I'll get us food." She sank into the chair like her legs could no longer hold her. Xander walked to the bar where a heavyset man with an impressive mustache was pouring drinks. "Need 2 plates of whatever you have hot, and water," Xander said, putting coins on the scarred wooden surface. The bartender glanced past him to the woman. "That the beggar from outside? That's a woman who needs food. You serving, or should I take my money to the hotel restaurant?" The man grunted and swept up the coins. "Stew and bread. It'll be out shortly." Xander returned to the table and sat across from her. Now that they were in better light, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, probably around 20 or 21. Despite the grime and exhaustion, she had delicate features and an air about her that spoke of a different life. "I'm Xander Ives," he said, removing his hat and setting it on the table between them. "Kaitlyn Kane." She folded her hands in her lap, her eyes downcast. "You did not have to do this." "Maybe not, but here we are." A girl brought over 2 cups of water, sloshing some on the table. Kaitlyn reached for hers with shaking hands and drank like she was dying of thirst. Xander watched her drain the cup in seconds. "More water," he called out, and the girl hurried over with a pitcher. Kaitlyn drank 2 more cups before setting the glass down carefully. "Thank you." "You want to tell me how you ended up outside that tavern?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then she lifted her eyes to his, and he saw pain there that went deeper than hunger. My father was a lawyer in Boston. He died 6 months ago. My mother had already passed when I was 16. Father left debts I did not know about. The house was sold to pay them, and everything else went too. I had a cousin in California who wrote that I could come stay with her family. I used the last of my money for the train fare, but when I arrived in San Francisco, I learned she had died of fever 2 months prior. Her husband had taken their children and moved, no one knew where. She paused as the serving girl brought 2 steaming bowls of stew and thick slices of bread. The smell made Xander's stomach growl, but he waited, watching Kaitlyn's face. I tried to find work in San Francisco, she continued, her eyes fixed on the bowl before her. But I had no references and no skills that anyone valued. I could read and write and do mathematics, but that meant nothing. A man offered me a job at what he called an entertainment house. When I realized what he really meant, I refused. He became angry and threw me out of his establishment. Other men made similar offers. I realized I needed to leave the city. So you came here. I met a family heading to Arizona Territory. They said I could travel with them if I helped with their children. The work was hard but honest. Then the father took ill outside of Tucson. Very ill. The wife accused me of bringing bad luck, of causing his sickness with my presence. She turned me out with nothing. I walked for days before reaching Oatman. I thought perhaps in a mining town, someone might need a cook or a laundress, but no one would hire me. They took one look at me and saw only trouble or assumed I was looking to work in the brothels. I was not. I am not. Her voice cracked on the last words. Xander felt something twist in his chest. Eat, he said gently. She picked up her spoon with trembling hands and took a small bite of the stew. Then another. He could see her forcing herself to eat slowly when she clearly wanted to devour the entire bowl. He started on his own meal, giving her space. They ate in silence for several minutes. Xander soaked his bread in the stew, his mind working through possibilities he had no business considering. He had come to Oatman to blow off steam and rest before heading back to Texas. He had a job waiting for him on a ranch near San Antonio. He had plans. None of those plans involved a desperate woman with green eyes and a tragic story, but he could not stop looking at her. "What will you do now?" he asked when they had both finished eating. Kaitlyn folded her napkin carefully, her movements precise despite her obvious exhaustion. "I do not know. I have been praying for guidance, but heaven has been quiet. Do you have anywhere to stay tonight?" She shook her head. "I have been sleeping behind the general store." The owner does not seem to notice. Xander made a decision that probably made him 10 kinds of a fool. "The hotel has rooms. I will get you one for the night." Her eyes widened. "I cannot accept that. You have already done too much. You can and you will. You need a proper bed and a chance to clean up. Then tomorrow we can figure out what comes next." "Why are you helping me?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "You do not know me. I could be lying about everything." "Are you?" "No." "Then that's settled." He stood and offered his hand again. This time she took it without hesitation. Her grip was stronger now, the food already beginning to restore some of her strength. They walked out of the tavern together, and Xander felt the weight of curious stares following them into the dusty street. The Oatman Hotel was a 2-story building that had seen better days, but it was clean and respectable. The woman at the front desk, a sharp-eyed widow named Mrs. Porter, looked them over with obvious suspicion. "Need a room for the lady," Xander said, putting money on the desk. "For how many nights?" "3 to start." Mrs. Porter's eyebrows climbed toward her gray hairline. "Will you be sharing the room?" "No, madam. The lady needs her own accommodations. I have my own room at the boarding house down the street." The widow's expression softened slightly. She pushed a registration book toward Kaitlyn. "Name, Kaitlyn Kane. You will find the room at the top of the stairs, second door on the right. Breakfast is served at 7 in the dining room. Bathhouse is out back if you need it. Water costs extra." "Add it to the bill," Xander said. Kaitlyn turned to him, her eyes shining with tears she was clearly fighting to contain. "I do not know how to repay you for this kindness. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow." She nodded and took the key Mrs. Porter offered, then climbed the stairs with slow, careful steps. Xander watched her go, that strange feeling still tugging at his chest. "That was a decent thing you did," Mrs. Porter said quietly. She needed help. Most men would have expected something in return. Xander met her gaze steadily. "I am not most men." He left the hotel and walked through the evening streets of Oatman. The town was coming alive as the sun set, miners pouring out of the claims and into the saloons. Music drifted from open doorways, along with laughter and the occasional shout. Xander had planned to join them, to drink and maybe play some cards, to enjoy his hard-earned money. Instead, he found himself at the general store, talking to a suspicious shopkeeper, who eventually relented and sold him a simple dress, a shawl, and some basic necessities he thought a woman might need. He felt awkward buying such items, but the thought of Kaitlyn with nothing but the ragged dress on her back bothered him more than his discomfort. He returned to the hotel and asked Mrs. Porter to deliver the package to Kaitlyn's room. The widow took the items with a knowing look that made his ears burn. "You are playing a dangerous game, Cowboy. How do you figure? A woman like that, she'll steal your heart before you know it's gone." Xander settled his hat more firmly on his head. "My heart's my own business, Mrs. Porter." But as he walked back to his boarding house through the cooling desert air, he wondered if maybe the widow was right. Sleep came hard that night. Xander kept seeing Kaitlyn's face, the desperate hunger in her eyes, the quiet dignity she had maintained even at her lowest point. He had met plenty of women in his 24 years, had even fancied himself in love once or twice. But something about Kaitlyn Kane had gotten under his skin in a way he did not quite understand. The next morning he was up before dawn, restless and unable to stay in bed. He washed and shaved at the basin in his room, then dressed in his cleanest shirt and pants. The face that looked back at him from the small mirror was weathered beyond his years, lines etched around his eyes from squinting into the sun. He wondered what Kaitlyn saw when she looked at him. He waited until a respectable hour before heading to the hotel. The dining room was half full of guests eating breakfast, and he spotted Kaitlyn immediately. She sat alone at a corner table, wearing the dress he had bought. It fit reasonably well, and she had clearly taken advantage of the bathhouse. Her blonde hair was clean and pulled back in a simple style, and the worst of the grime was gone from her skin. She looked like a completely different person. She looked beautiful. Their eyes met across the room, and she gave him a small, uncertain smile. Xander felt his heart do something strange in his chest as he walked over to her table. "May I join you, please?" She gestured to the chair across from her. "I wanted to thank you for the dress and the other things." "You have been so generous." It was nothing. It was everything. Her voice was fierce, and he saw tears threatening again. "You have no idea what it means to feel human again, to be clean and fed and safe." The serving girl came over, and Xander ordered coffee and eggs. When they were alone again, he leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I have been thinking about your situation. As have I. I cannot stay here indefinitely on your charity. I need to find work to support myself." "What kind of work can you do?" She considered the question carefully. "I can read and write well. I can do figures." I was educated at a finishing school in Boston before my mother died. I can play piano, though I am not sure how useful that skill is here. I can sew reasonably well, though I am no seamstress. I can cook simple meals. Can you keep books? Ledgers and such? Yes. My father taught me to help him with his law practice accounts. An idea had been forming in Xander's mind since he woke up, an idea that was probably crazy but felt right in his gut. I own a ranch. Kaitlyn blinked. I thought you were a cowboy. I am. Was. Both, I suppose. My father died 3 years ago and left me a spread in Texas, near a town called Redemption Creek outside San Antonio. It is not huge, but it is mine. I have been working other ranches to earn money to build mine up, to buy more cattle and hire hands. I have a foreman watching the place now, but he is getting old and wants to retire. I was planning to head back there after this last drive. That sounds like a good plan. It would be better if I had help. Someone to manage the books, to handle the household, to help me build something real. Understanding dawned in her eyes along with wariness. What are you suggesting? Come back to Texas with me. Work for me. I will pay you fair wages and provide room and board. You will have your own space, your own privacy. I will not expect anything improper. You will be an employee, nothing more. Kaitlyn stared at him like he had sprouted a second head. You want to hire me? A woman you met yesterday begging outside a tavern. I want to help you, and I happen to need help. Seems like it could work for both of us. This is madness. You know nothing about me. I know you are educated and desperate and honest. I know you have been dealt a bad hand through no fault of your own. I know you need a chance, and I am offering you one. She shook her head slowly. If I travel alone with you to Texas, my reputation will be destroyed. We could travel separately. You take the stage, I will ride. We meet up in Redemption Creek. And when I arrive at your ranch as an unmarried woman to live and work, what will your neighbors think? What will they say? Xander had not considered that angle, and he realized she was right. The decent families in the area would never accept her in such an arrangement. The women would shun her, assume the worst. It would make her life miserable. Then we tell them you are my wife. The words hung in the air between them. Kaitlyn's face went pale, then flushed pink. You cannot be serious. Why not? It would solve the problem. We would have a marriage in name only, just for appearances. You would have protection and security. I would have the help I need. When you are back on your feet, if you want to leave, we could get the marriage quietly dissolved. That would be living a lie. That would be surviving. Sometimes survival requires compromise. Kaitlyn pushed her plate away, her breakfast half-eaten. This is too much. You are offering me too much. I am offering you a job and a roof over your head. Yes, there is an unusual arrangement attached, but it could work. Unless you have a better option. She was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face. Why would you do this? There must be dozens of women who would jump at the chance to marry a rancher, even a small one. Why choose me? Xander did not have a good answer for that. He could not explain the pull he felt toward her, the certainty in his gut that this was right. Maybe I am just a fool cowboy with more heart than sense. But my offer stands. Think about it. You have 3 days while that room is paid for. His breakfast arrived and they ate in awkward silence. Xander could practically hear Kaitlyn thinking, weighing her limited options. He focused on his eggs and tried not to watch her too obviously. When they finished, she folded her napkin precisely and met his eyes. If I agreed to this arrangement, I would need to know more about you, about your ranch, about what you expect from me. Hope flared in his chest. That is fair. What do you want to know? Everything. They spent the rest of the morning walking through Oatman while Xander talked. He told her about growing up on his father's ranch, learning to ride before he could properly walk. He told her about his mother, who had died of fever when he was 12. and how his father had never quite recovered from losing her. He told her about inheriting the ranch at 21 and realizing he did not have the money or experience to run it properly. So he had left it in the hands of his father's foreman and gone to work for larger operations to learn and save money. He told her about his dreams of building a real herd, of creating something lasting, of making his father proud even though the old man was gone. He told her about the house on the property, small but solid, built by his grandfather's hands. He told her about the creek that ran year-round and the cottonwood trees that lined its banks. Kaitlyn listened without interrupting, and he found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, about his loneliness, about his fear that he was not good enough, smart enough, to make the ranch work, about his hope that maybe, somehow, he could build the life his father had always wanted for him. When he finally ran out of words, they were standing at the edge of town, looking out at the desert landscape that stretched to the horizon. The sun was climbing high and heat shimmered off the earth. "It sounds like a good life," Kaitlyn said softly. "Hard but good. It would be. With the right help." She turned to face him fully. "If I accept your offer, I want things clear between us from the start. This would be a business arrangement. I would keep your books, manage your household, cook and clean within reason. I would play the part of your wife in public. But in private, we would maintain separate spaces. You would not touch me without my permission. You would not expect me to share your bed. Agreed. If at any point I want to leave, you will not stop me. You will provide me with enough money to start over somewhere else. Agreed. And if you find someone you truly want to marry, someone you love, we will end this arrangement and you will be free to pursue that life." That condition stung a bit, though Xander could not say why. "Agreed. Same goes for you. If you meet someone, we end things properly." Kaitlyn extended her hand. "Then we have a deal, Mr. Ives." He took her hand, her skin warm now and her grip firm. "We have a deal, Miss Kane. Or I suppose it will be Mrs. Ives soon enough." The reality of what they were agreeing to seemed to hit them both at once. They stood there in the desert sun, hands clasped, staring at each other like they had both lost their minds. Maybe they had. "When do we leave for Texas?" Kaitlyn asked. "As soon as we are married. It would not look right otherwise." "How do we arrange that?" "There is a preacher in town. We go see him today, have him perform a simple ceremony. Then we head out tomorrow." Kaitlyn nodded slowly. "All right. Let us go find this preacher before I lose my nerve." Reverend Thomas was a gaunt man with kind eyes who ran a small church on the edge of Oatman. He listened to their request with a knowing expression that suggested he had heard stranger things in his years serving a mining town. "You understand that marriage is a sacred covenant?" he asked, looking between them. "Yes, sir," Xander said. "And you are both entering into this of your own free will?" "We are," Kaitlyn confirmed. "Miss Kane, you are not being coerced or forced in any way." "No, Reverend. Mr. Ives has been nothing but kind and respectful." The preacher studied them for a long moment. "I will perform the ceremony on one condition. You both must understand that, while you may have your own reasons for this union, in the eyes of God and the law, you will be truly married. The vows you speak will be binding. If you cannot honor that, then I cannot in good conscience marry you." Xander glanced at Kaitlyn. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. "We understand," Xander said. "We will honor our vows. Then I will marry you tomorrow at noon. Bring 2 witnesses. Finding witnesses proved easier than expected. Mrs. Porter from the hotel agreed to stand for Kaitlyn, and Xander asked Ben Cooper, an old trail hand he had worked with years before who happened to be in town. Ben raised his eyebrows at the quick courtship, but agreed without asking too many questions. That night, Xander lay awake in his boarding house room, staring at the ceiling and wondering if he had completely lost his mind. Tomorrow, he would marry a woman he had known for less than 2 days. He would bind himself to her legally and spiritually based on nothing more than a gut feeling and a desire to help her. His mother would have called it romantic. His father would have called it foolish. Xander did not know what to call it. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Kaitlyn's face, and something in his chest felt settled in a way it never had before. The wedding was brief and businesslike, conducted in the small church with only the 4 of them present. Kaitlyn wore the dress he had bought her, and someone had loaned her a ribbon for her hair. She looked nervous but determined as she stood beside him. Reverend Thomas led them through the traditional vows. When it came time for Xander to say, "I do," his voice came out strong and sure. When Kaitlyn spoke the same words, hers wavered only slightly. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona and Almighty God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Xander had not thought about this part. He looked at Kaitlyn and saw his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. Then she gave a tiny nod, and he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers briefly, chastely. It was his first kiss and probably hers too, and it lasted no more than 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, Xander felt something shift in the universe, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. They signed the marriage certificate, and it was done. Kaitlyn Kane was now Kaitlyn Ives, and Xander had a wife. Mrs. Porter dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Congratulations to you both. May you have a long and happy life together." Ben clapped Xander on the shoulder. "You are either the bravest man I know or the craziest. Maybe both." They had a small meal at the hotel to mark the occasion, and then it was time to prepare for the journey. Xander had already made arrangements. They would take the stage to Tucson, then catch the train to San Antonio. From there, it was a day's ride to Redemption Creek and his ranch. The next morning, they boarded the stage before dawn. Kaitlyn carried a small bag containing her few possessions, including the items Xander had bought her. He had his saddle bags and his rifle. They settled into the cramped coach with 4 other passengers, and then they were moving, leaving Oatman behind in a cloud of dust. The journey was long and uncomfortable, the desert heat oppressive even as they rattled along the rough roads. Kaitlyn sat beside Xander, her body swaying with the motion of the coach, and he found himself hyper-aware of every place where their shoulders or arms touched. They did not talk much during the trip. The other passengers were not interested in conversation, and the noise of the wheels made extended discussion difficult anyway. But sometimes, Xander would catch Kaitlyn looking at him, and he wondered what she was thinking. Was she regretting her decision? Was she scared of what lay ahead? They reached Tucson by evening and stayed the night at a boarding house. Xander got 2 rooms, maintaining the appearance of propriety even though they were now legally married. He lay in his narrow bed and listened to the sounds of the night, thinking about Kaitlyn in the room next door. The train journey was easier, the locomotive carrying them across the territory in a fraction of the time it would have taken by horse. Kaitlyn pressed her face to the window, watching the landscape change from desert to scrubland to the greener terrain of East Texas. She had never been on a train before, and despite everything, Xander caught glimpses of excitement in her expression. They reached San Antonio 3 days after leaving Oatman. The city was bustling and loud after the quieter mining town, and Xander saw Kaitlyn tense up at the crowds. He stayed close to her as they made their way to the livery where he had arranged to buy a wagon and horse. The transaction took most of the afternoon, and then they were loading their few possessions into the wagon bed. Xander helped Kaitlyn up onto the bench seat, then climbed up beside her. He took the reins and clicked his tongue, and they began the final leg of the journey. The road to Redemption Creek wound through rolling hills covered in live oak and mesquite. Cattle dotted the landscape, and they passed several ranches along the way. The further they got from San Antonio, the more Xander felt himself relax. This was his country, his home. "It is beautiful," Kaitlyn said, speaking for the first time in hours. "I did not expect it to be so green. We get good rain here, more than the desert country. It is not like Boston, I imagine, but it has its own charm. I like it." She sounded surprised. "It feels open, free." They reached Redemption Creek as the sun was setting. The town was small, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of other buildings. People were finishing their day's work, and Xander saw several familiar faces turn to stare as the wagon rolled past. He did not stop in town. Instead, he drove another 2 miles down a well-worn trail until they reached a gate with the brand of the Ives Ranch burned into a wooden sign hanging above it. The Circle I, his father had called it. "We are here," Xander said, and he heard the pride in his own voice. The house came into view as they rounded a bend in the trail. It was not large, just 4 rooms, but it was solidly built of wood and stone with a covered porch running along the front. Cottonwood trees shaded it, and beyond it, Xander could see the creek sparkling in the last of the sunlight. The barn and outbuildings were in good repair, and he could see cattle grazing in the near pasture. "Home." An older man emerged from the barn, his weathered face breaking into a grin when he saw the wagon. This was Henry Millstone, his father's foreman and the man who had been keeping the ranch running in Xander's absence. "Well, I'll be damned," Henry called out. "You finally came home, boy." Xander brought the wagon to a stop and jumped down. "Henry, good to see you." They shook hands, and Henry's sharp eyes took in Kaitlyn still sitting in the wagon. "Who is this?" "This is my wife, Kaitlyn. Kaitlyn, this is Henry Millstone. He has been running things here." To her credit, Kaitlyn did not flinch at being introduced as his wife. She smiled and accepted Henry's help to climb down from the wagon. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Millstone." "Your wife?" Henry looked between them, clearly shocked. "When did this happen?" "Just a few days ago in Arizona. It was a quick courtship, I will say." Henry scratched his jaw. "Well, congratulations to you both. This place could use a woman's touch." Xander helped Kaitlyn carry their bags into the house while Henry tended to the horse and wagon. The interior was clean but sparse, just as Xander had left it months ago. The main room held a stone fireplace, a table with chairs, and a few other basic furnishings. A small kitchen area was tucked in one corner. 2 doorways led to the bedrooms, and a third led to a storage room. "It is not much," Xander said, suddenly seeing the place through Kaitlyn's eyes and finding it wanting. "But it is solid. You can have the larger bedroom. I will take the smaller one." Kaitlyn walked slowly through the space, her fingers trailing over the table, the back of a chair. "It is more than I have had in months. It is wonderful." The simple honesty in her voice made his throat tight. "I am glad you think so. We can fix it up however you like, paint, furniture, whatever you need." She turned to him with a soft smile. "Thank you, Xander, for all of this." It was the first time she had used his given name, and he liked the sound of it in her voice. "You are welcome, Kaitlyn." They spent the rest of the evening settling in. Henry joined them for a simple supper of beans and bread, catching Xander up on ranch business. The herd was healthy, numbering about 200 head. They had lost a few to predators and one to lightning strike, but overall things were stable. Henry had hired 2 young men to help with the daily work, brothers named Jack and Tom Morrison, who lived in Redemption Creek. "They are good boys, hard workers," Henry said. "You will like them." "I am grateful you kept things running," Xander told him. I know you are ready to retire, Henry. I will make sure you get what is owed to you. Your father was good to me. I am just paying that back. But yes, these old bones are ready for some rest. He glanced at Kaitlyn. Having a wife will help. Running a ranch is more than one person can handle alone. After Henry left, Xander showed Kaitlyn around the property in the fading light. The barn was well stocked with hay and tools. The chicken coop held a dozen hens. The garden plot was overgrown but salvageable. The creek was clear and cold, fed by springs upstream. "This is all yours?" Kaitlyn asked, looking out over the land. "Ours now, legally speaking. The ranch is about 300 acres. Not huge, but enough to support a decent herd. It must have been hard to leave it. It was necessary. I was too young and too poor to make it work on my own. Now I have the money and the experience. Now I can really build something here." They walked back to the house in comfortable silence. The stars were coming out, bright and numerous in the clear Texas sky. Xander found himself wanting to point out constellations, to share the names his father had taught him, but he kept quiet. There would be time for that later. Inside, they both hovered awkwardly in the main room. The intimacy of being alone together in what was now their shared home pressed down on them. "I should let you get some rest," Xander finally said. "It has been a long few days." "Yes, thank you again, Xander, for everything. Sleep well, Kaitlyn." He retreated to the smaller bedroom and closed the door, then stood there listening to her move around in the other room. He heard water pouring, soft footsteps, the creak of the bed frame. Then silence. Xander undressed and lay down on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling just as he had in Oatman. He was home. He had a wife. His life had changed completely in the span of less than a week, and somehow, despite the strangeness of it all, it felt right. The next few weeks fell into a routine that surprised them both with its ease. Xander rose before dawn each day to tend the cattle and horses with the Morrison brothers and Henry. Kaitlyn threw herself into managing the household with an energy that spoke of her relief at having purpose again. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing away months of bachelor neglect. She planted vegetables in the garden, coaxing the overgrown plot back to productivity. She learned to cook over the fireplace, experimenting with the limited ingredients available and gradually improving. Xander never complained, even when the biscuits were hard enough to break teeth or the stew was oversalted. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit on the porch and talk. Xander told her stories about growing up on the ranch, about his father's dreams and his mother's kindness. Kaitlyn talked about Boston, about her education, about the books she had loved and the music she missed playing. They began to know each other in the way that only comes from shared space and shared time. Xander learned that Kaitlyn was left-handed, that she had a stubborn streak a mile wide, that she sang quietly to herself when she thought no one was listening. Kaitlyn learned that Xander was patient and methodical, that he cared deeply about doing things right, that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. They also learned to navigate the strange intimacy of their arrangement. They were careful to give each other privacy, to knock before entering rooms, to maintain the boundaries they had set. But sometimes their hands would brush as they passed dishes at the table. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the room and hold for a beat too long. And sometimes, late at night, Xander would lie in his bed and think about the woman sleeping in the next room and wonder what it would be like if their marriage was real in every sense. Henry officially retired at the end of the first month, taking his pay and his few belongings and heading to live with a daughter in Dallas. Xander was sad to see him go but grateful for everything the old man had done. With Henry gone, the full weight of the ranch fell on Xander's shoulders. He worked from dawn until well past dark most days, branding cattle, mending fences, breaking a new horse, handling the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. The Morrison brothers were good help, but they were young and still learning. Kaitlyn noticed his exhaustion and started bringing him lunch in the fields, cold water and sandwiches that tasted better than they had any right to. She also started reviewing the ranch books, pointing out inefficiencies and suggesting ways to stretch their resources further. Her educated mind quickly grasped the economics of ranching, and Xander found himself relying on her input more and more. "You are good at this," he told her one evening as they reviewed the ledgers together. "You have a head for figures." "My father always said I should have been born a man so I could have used my mind properly." She said it matter-of-factly, but Xander heard the old pain underneath. "Your father was a fool. Your mind is valuable regardless of whether you are a man or a woman." She looked up at him, surprise and something else flickering in her green eyes. "Thank you for saying that. I mean it. I could not run this place without you." It was true. In just a few weeks, Kaitlyn had become essential to the ranch's operation. She kept the books, managed their supplies, helped with the animals when extra hands were needed. She was also beginning to win over the neighboring families. Their first real test came when Sarah Jenkins, wife of their nearest neighbor, arrived one afternoon for a visit. Sarah was a formidable woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper opinions. She had known Xander's parents and clearly wanted to assess his new wife. Kaitlyn served her tea and fresh biscuits that actually turned out well, and she answered Sarah's probing questions with grace and patience. Yes, they had married quickly. Yes, it was a whirlwind courtship. No, there was no child on the way that necessitated a hasty wedding. Yes, she was adjusting well to ranch life. When Sarah finally left, she seemed satisfied. "Your wife seems like a sensible woman," she told Xander on her way out. "A bit refined for ranch life, perhaps, but she has backbone. You did well." After that, other visitors came. More neighbors curious about the new Mrs. Ives. The preacher from Redemption Creek, a jovial man named Reverend Dawson who was nothing like the stern Reverend Thomas from Oatman. Women from the church, bringing small gifts and not so subtle attempts to gather gossip. Kaitlyn handled them all with the polished manners from her Boston finishing school, and gradually, the community began to accept her. She was invited to join the church ladies' sewing circle. She was asked to help with the harvest festival planning. She was becoming part of the social fabric of Redemption Creek, but the strain of maintaining their pretense was beginning to wear on both of them. In public, they played the part of newlyweds, standing close, occasionally holding hands, presenting a united front. In private, they maintained their careful distance. It was getting harder. Xander found himself noticing everything about Kaitlyn. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The sound of her laughter, rare but lovely. The graceful movements of her hands, the curve of her neck. He would catch himself staring and force his eyes away, reminding himself of their agreement. This was a business arrangement. She was his employee, nothing more. But his heart was not listening to reason. It all came to a head on a hot afternoon in late August. Xander had been working on a particularly stubborn section of fence when a cottonwood branch, weakened by rot, came crashing down on him. He saw it coming, but could not move fast enough. The branch caught him across the shoulder and back, knocking him to the ground. Tom Morrison found him unconscious 20 minutes later and rode hard for the house. Kaitlyn came running when she heard the horse, her face going white when Tom explained what had happened. "Where is he?" "North pasture by the creek. Jack is with him. I came for the wagon." They hitched up the horse in record time and raced across the ranch. Xander was conscious by the time they reached him, sitting up with Jack's help, but he was clearly in pain. His shirt was torn and blood seeped through the fabric. "I am fine," he insisted, his voice tight. "Just got the wind knocked out of me." "You are not fine," Kaitlyn said sharply. "Get him in the wagon. Carefully." They drove back to the house, and Kaitlyn directed the brothers to help Xander into his bedroom and onto his bed. Then she shooed them out and closed the door. "I need to see how bad it is," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "Can you sit up?" Xander gritted his teeth and pushed himself upright. Kaitlyn helped him remove his torn shirt, and they both inhaled sharply at the damage. A long gash ran across his left shoulder blade, and bruises were already forming along his back and ribs. "The cut needs to be cleaned and stitched," Kaitlyn said, her voice remarkably steady. "I will get water and clean cloth. Do not move." She returned quickly with supplies and a bottle of whiskey. "This is going to hurt. You should drink some of this first." Xander took a long pull from the bottle, the liquor burning down his throat. Then Kaitlyn began cleaning the wound, and he discovered she had understated things significantly. It did not just hurt, it was agony. To his shame, he could not quite suppress a groan as she poured whiskey directly into the cut to disinfect it. "I am sorry," she murmured. "I know it hurts, but infection would be worse. Just do what you need to do." She threaded a needle with steady hands and began stitching the gash closed. Xander focused on breathing through the pain, his hands fisted in the quilt beneath him. Kaitlyn worked quickly and efficiently, her touch as gentle as possible given what she was doing. "Where did you learn to stitch wounds?" he managed to ask through clenched teeth. "I did not, but I have sewn plenty of dresses. The principle is the same, is it not? Just more important to get it right." Despite the pain, he almost smiled. "I suppose so." She finished the stitching and bandaged the wound with clean cloth. Then she helped him lie back against the pillows, her face lined with concern. "You should rest now. I will make you some willow bark tea for the pain." "Kaitlyn." He caught her hand before she could leave. "Thank you." She looked down at their joined hands, and when she met his eyes again, something had shifted in her expression. "You scared me. When Tom came saying you were hurt, I thought." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Just be more careful, please." "I will try." She slipped her hand free and left the room, and Xander lay there wondering what she had been about to say. The injury forced him to rest for several days, much to his frustration. Kaitlyn hovered, changing his bandages, bringing him meals, refusing to let him get up except for necessities. The Morrison brothers took over his duties, and Kaitlyn coordinated their work with surprising competence. On the third day, she brought him lunch and found him sitting on the edge of the bed, clearly planning to get up. "What do you think you are doing?" "I need to check on the herd." "The boys cannot handle everything alone." "The boys are doing fine. I rode out this morning to check on them myself." Xander stared at her. "You what?" "I borrowed your horse and rode out to the north pasture. Everything is under control. The fence is repaired. The cattle are fine." "You need to stay in bed and heal." "You rode out alone." "I am not helpless, Xander. I have been learning, watching. I know more about this ranch than you think." She was magnificent, standing there with her hands on her hips, her eyes flashing with determination. Xander felt something break loose in his chest, something he had been trying to hold back for weeks. "Kaitlyn, I need to tell you something." She must have heard the change in his tone because her expression softened. "What is it?" "This arrangement we have, this business agreement." He paused, trying to find the right words. "It is not working for me anymore." He saw fear flash across her face. "You want me to leave?" "No, God, no, the opposite." He stood up, ignoring the pull of his healing wound. "I do not want this to be an arrangement anymore. I want it to be real." She went very still. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I am falling in love with you. I might already be there, I do not know. But I know that I think about you constantly. I know that seeing you every day is the best part of my day. I know that when I was hurt, the first thing I thought about was whether I would ever see your face again." The words tumbled out, everything he had been holding back. "I know we agreed this was temporary, that we would keep our distance, but I cannot anymore. I do not want to." Tears spilled down Kaitlyn's cheeks. "You should not say these things." "Why not, if they are true?" "Because I have nothing to offer you. I came to you with nothing. I still have nothing. You deserve someone better, someone who comes from something. You have everything I want. You are smart and capable and kind. You make this house a home. You make this ranch better. You make me better." He took a step closer. "And I think maybe, possibly, you might feel the same way about me." She covered her face with her hands. "I do. That is the problem. I did not mean to. I tried not to, but yes, I have feelings for you. Real feelings. But Xander, I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of this not working. Of you regretting choosing me. Of waking up one day and realizing you only helped me out of pity." He gently pulled her hands away from her face. "Look at me. I did help you because I wanted to help. But that is not why I married you, and it is not why I am standing here telling you I love you. I am doing that because you are extraordinary and I am lucky enough to have you in my life. I want to believe you. Then believe me." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Let this be real, not an arrangement, not a convenience. A real marriage between two people who love each other. I am scared. So am I, but I would rather be scared with you than safe without you." She let out a shaky laugh. "That is not logical. Love is not logical." And then he kissed her. Not the brief, chaste kiss from their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and slow and full of everything he had been feeling. After a moment of surprise, Kaitlyn kissed him back, her arms coming up around his neck. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Xander rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Kaitlyn Ives." "I love you too, Xander Ives." They stood there in the small bedroom, holding each other while the Texas sun streamed through the window. And for the first time since his father died, Xander felt like he was truly home. Their relationship shifted after that day. They were no longer two people playing roles. They were husband and wife in truth, learning to navigate this new reality together. Xander moved his things into the larger bedroom, and they shared the space with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Those first nights were awkward as they learned each other's habits, but gradually the awkwardness faded into intimacy, and then into a deep, abiding closeness. They worked the ranch together, a true partnership. Kaitlyn proved herself as capable on horseback as she was with the account books. She learned to throw a lasso, to ride hard when needed, to handle cattle with confidence. The Morrison brothers treated her with respect, and neighboring ranchers began consulting her on matters of business. The Harvest Festival that year was their first real outing as a couple in love, rather than one maintaining appearances. Everyone in Redemption Creek attended, and Xander held Kaitlyn close as they danced under the stars to music from a fiddle and guitar. "Happy?" he asked, spinning her around. "Happier than I have ever been," she admitted. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real." "It is real. You are stuck with me now. I can think of worse fates." Sarah Jenkins approached them when the dance ended. "You two seem genuinely happy. I confess I had my doubts at first. A whirlwind courtship, a girl from back east, it all seemed suspicious. But I was wrong. You are good together." "Thank you, Sarah," Kaitlyn said warmly. "That means a great deal." As fall turned to winter, they settled deeper into their life together. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Xander hired another hand to help with the growing workload. They bought more cattle, expanding the herd. They made improvements to the house, adding on a proper kitchen and a second room they did not quite have a use for yet, but both secretly hoped they would one day. Christmas came, and they hosted the Morrison brothers and several neighbors for dinner. Kaitlyn cooked for days, preparing a feast that had everyone praising her skills. Xander watched her laugh and talk with their guests, her face glowing in the firelight, and felt his heart swell with love. That night, after everyone had gone and they were cleaning up, he pulled her into his arms. "This is what I dreamed about when I was working those cattle drives. Coming home to this, to you," she kissed him softly. "I never let myself dream. I was too busy surviving. But if I had, I would have dreamed of this. Of you." Spring brought new calves and the hard work of branding and vaccinating. It also brought news that Kaitlyn had been hoping for and fearing in equal measure. She told him one evening after supper, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I need to tell you something." Xander felt his stomach drop. "What is it? Are you unwell?" "No, the opposite actually. Xander, I am with child." Time seemed to stop. He stared at her, processing the words. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be. All the signs are there. I think it happened around Christmas." A grin split his face, wide and unstoppable. "We are having a baby, we are." She searched his face anxiously. "Are you happy? I know we have not discussed it, and the ranch is still getting established, and maybe this is too soon." He cut off her worried rambling with a kiss. "I am thrilled, ecstatic, over the moon. Truly, truly." He placed his hand gently over her still flat stomach. "We are going to be parents." Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but these were happy tears. "I love you so much." "I love you too, both of you." They told their friends and neighbors, and everyone was excited. The women of the church immediately began planning and bringing gifts. Sarah Jenkins appointed herself Kaitlyn's unofficial advisor on all things related to pregnancy and childbirth, offering advice both welcome and not. Xander became almost comically overprotective. He did not want Kaitlyn riding anymore, or lifting anything heavy, or working too hard. She laughed at his hovering but secretly loved being so cared for. Summer came again, hot and dry. Kaitlyn grew round and uncomfortable but never complained. Xander would rub her feet in the evenings and read to her from the books she loved. They talked about names, about the future, about the life they were building for their child. "Boy or girl, what do you think?" Xander asked one night as they sat on the porch, watching the stars. "I do not know." "I will be happy either way." "Me too. Though if it is a boy, I hope he has your brains. And if it is a girl, I hope she has your kindness." He kissed her temple. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky. Or maybe it was not luck, maybe it was meant to be." "I like that idea." Their son was born on a hot September afternoon. The labor was long and difficult, and Xander paced holes in the floor while Sarah and two other women attended to Kaitlyn in the bedroom. When he finally heard the baby cry, his knees nearly gave out with relief. Sarah emerged hours later, tired but smiling. "You have a healthy baby boy, and your wife is asking for you." Xander rushed into the room. Kaitlyn lay propped against pillows, pale and exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with such love it took his breath away. "Come meet your son." He approached carefully, almost afraid to get too close, afraid he might break something. Then he looked down at the baby's scrunched red face and felt his entire world reorganize itself around this tiny person. "He is perfect," Xander whispered. "He is. What should we name him?" They had discussed this endlessly but never quite decided. Now, looking at his son, Xander knew. "I want to name him after your father." "What was his name?" "David." Kaitlyn's voice caught. "David Michael Kane." "David Michael Ives. Is that all right?" "It is perfect." Xander carefully took his son in his arms, marveling at how light he was, how fragile. David opened his eyes briefly, giving his father a glimpse of dark blue, then yawned and settled against Xander's chest. "I promise I will take care of you," Xander murmured. "You and your mother both. I promise I will give you the best life I can." "You already are," Kaitlyn said softly. The first months of David's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. They took turns walking him when he cried, feeding him, changing him, just watching him sleep. The ranch work continued, but everything felt different now, more purposeful. They were not just building a ranch. They were building a legacy for their son. David was a healthy baby who grew quickly. He had Kaitlyn's blonde hair, and as the months passed, it became clear he had inherited her green eyes too. He also had Xander's easy temperament, rarely fussing unless he was truly uncomfortable. "He is going to be tall," Sarah predicted, holding David when he was 6 months old. "Look at those long legs. He will be a heartbreaker when he grows up." The years passed in a rhythm of hard work and deep happiness. The ranch continued to prosper. They expanded their holdings, buying adjacent land when it became available. The herd grew to 500 head, then 700. They hired more hands to help manage it all. Kaitlyn proved herself invaluable not just to their own operation, but to the community. She helped other ranchers with their books when they struggled. She taught reading and writing to children whose parents could not afford formal schooling. She became one of the most respected women in Redemption Creek. Xander built the ranch into exactly what he had dreamed of. But more than that, he built a life filled with love. He and Kaitlyn grew closer with each passing year, their partnership deepening into something unshakable. When David was 3, Kaitlyn became pregnant again. This time she knew the signs immediately, and she told Xander on a spring evening much like the one when she had announced David. "We are expanding the family again." Xander pulled her close, his hand finding its familiar place on her belly. "I was hoping we would. David needs a sibling to torment." Their daughter, Emma Rose, was born in the winter of 1886. She had dark hair like Xander and a fierce cry that announced her personality from the start. David was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. "Gentle," Kaitlyn would remind him as he patted Emma's head. "She is very small." "I am gentle," David would insist in his 3-year-old voice. "I am a good big brother," he was. As Emma grew, David became her protector and playmate. They were inseparable, running through the ranch, helping with small chores as they got older, filling the house with noise and laughter. 2 years later, another son arrived. They named him Samuel, and he completed their family. 3 children, a prosperous ranch, a love that had only grown stronger with time. Xander would sometimes stand on his porch in the evening watching Kaitlyn play with their children, and marvel at how different his life was from what he had imagined that day in Oatman. One evening when David was 10, Emma was 7, and Samuel was 5, the family sat together on the porch after supper. The children were playing a game with stones while Xander and Kaitlyn sat close together on the bench swing he had built. "You ever think about that day?" Kaitlyn asked quietly. "The day we met, all the time, best decision I ever made stopping to talk to you. I was so desperate, so lost. I did not think I had any future at all. And now look at you. You have 3 children who adore you, a husband who loves you, and half the county asking your advice on everything from cattle to cooking." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never imagined I could be this happy. There were times before you when I did not think I would survive. And now I have everything. So do I." He kissed the top of her head. "You gave me everything, Kaitlyn, a real home, a family, a reason to build something lasting. We gave that to each other." David ran over, his face flushed from playing. "Papa, tell us the story again, about how you met Mama." It had become their favorite bedtime story, the tale of how their parents met. Xander looked at Kaitlyn and she smiled, nodding. "All right, gather around." The children settled at their feet, even Samuel abandoning his stones to listen. Xander took a breath and began the story they all knew by heart, but never tired of hearing. It was a hot summer day in Oatman, Arizona Territory. I had just finished a long cattle drive and was tired and hungry. As I walked toward the tavern for a meal, I saw a woman sitting outside. She looked like she had not eaten in days, and something about her made me stop. "That was Mama," Emma said, right on cue. "That was your Mama. I asked her when she had last eaten, and she said 2 days, so I took her inside and bought her supper." We talked, and I learned she had traveled all the way from Boston but had nowhere to go and no one to help her. "And you helped her," David continued. "You gave her food and a place to stay." "I did. And then I asked her to come back to Texas with me, to help me run this ranch." "But you got married first," Samuel piped up. "We did. We got married in a little church in Oatman, and then we traveled here together. And we built this ranch together, your Mama and me. We built this whole life. And then you had us," Emma concluded. "And then we had you 3. The best parts of our whole story." Kaitlyn was crying quietly, and Xander pulled her closer. After all these years, the story still moved her. Later, after the children were in bed, Xander and Kaitlyn stood together looking out at their land. The moon was bright, illuminating the pastures and the cattle, the barn and the outbuildings, everything they had worked so hard to create. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you had walked past me that day?" Kaitlyn asked. "No, because I did not walk past, I stopped. And even if I had tried to walk past, I do not think I could have. Something pulled me to you. Fate, maybe, or maybe just my heart recognizing yours." She turned to face him fully. "I love you, Xander Ives, more today than yesterday, more tomorrow than today. I love you, Kaitlyn Ives. Thank you for begging outside that tavern." She laughed through her tears. "Thank you for feeding me. I did not just feed you, I gave you my life, and I gave you mine." They stood there under the Texas stars, holding each other, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The ranch would continue to prosper. Their children would grow up strong and loved. And years from now, their grandchildren would sit on this same porch and hear the same story about a cowboy and a desperate woman, and a moment of kindness that changed everything. But for now, in this moment, it was just the 2 of them and the life they had created. And it was more than enough. It was everything. The years continued to unfold in patterns of work and love, seasons changing, children growing. David became a skilled horseman, learning everything Xander could teach him about ranching. Emma showed her mother's head for numbers, helping Kaitlyn with the books as soon as she was old enough. Samuel was quieter than his siblings, but had a way with animals that amazed everyone. Xander's hair began to show silver at the temples when he was in his 30s, and Kaitlyn teased him about it gently. She remained as beautiful to him as she had been that day in Oatman, perhaps more so, her face showing the marks of laughter and sun and a life fully lived. They weathered hard times together, droughts that tested their resources, harsh winters that took some of their herd, the inevitable challenges that came with raising children and running a ranch. But they faced it all side by side, their partnership as strong as ever. When David turned 16, Xander officially made him a full partner in the ranch operations. The boy was ready, and Xander was proud to share the work with his son. Emma, at 13, had already begun helping neighboring families with their accounts, following in her mother's footsteps. Samuel, at 11, spent every free moment in the barn, training horses with patience and skill. One evening, with all 3 children occupied with their own tasks, Xander and Kaitlyn stole away to their favorite spot by the creek. They sat on the bank, their feet dangling in the cool water watching the sun set. "We have done all right, have we not?" Xander said. "More than all right. We have built something amazing. The children are growing up so fast. Soon they will not need us anymore." Kaitlyn squeezed his hand. "They will always need us, just in different ways, and when they leave to build their own lives, we will still have each other. That is all I need. You are all I have ever needed." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat there until the stars came out, just as they had done countless times over the years. The same stars that had witnessed their first awkward days as strangers playing house, the same stars that had seen them fall in love, the same stars that would watch over them for all the years to come. Time moved forward. David married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread when he was 21, and they built a house on the far side of the Ives property. Their first child, a girl they named Kaitlyn after her grandmother, arrived the following year, and Xander discovered that being a grandfather was somehow even better than being a father. Emma went to San Antonio to study at a school for young women, much to everyone's surprise. She returned 2 years later with even more knowledge of business and finance, and immediately began modernizing the ranch's operations. She also returned with a young banker named Thomas Wright, whom she married in a ceremony that had half of Redemption Creek in attendance. Samuel stayed on the ranch, never wanting to leave. He married late, at 28, to a widow with a young daughter who needed a home. Samuel loved them both fiercely and proved himself as devoted a father as Xander had been. Through it all, Xander and Kaitlyn remained the center of the family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Their love story became legend in Redemption Creek, a tale told to illustrate that sometimes the most desperate circumstances can lead to the greatest blessings. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house that had once seemed so empty. Xander stood to make a toast, his hand finding Kaitlyn's as naturally as breathing. 25 years ago, I was a young cowboy with more dreams than sense. I stopped to help a woman in need, and she ended up saving me right back. Kaitlyn, you have been my partner, my best friend, my love, and the mother of my children. You have made every day brighter, every burden lighter. You have given me a life beyond anything I imagined. Thank you for saying yes in that little church in Oatman. Thank you for taking a chance on us." Kaitlyn stood beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away. Thank you for your kindness, your patience, your love. You did not just give me a meal that day, Xander. You gave me hope. You gave me a future. You gave me everything." They kissed while their family cheered, and if the kiss lasted a bit longer than was strictly proper, no one minded. Later, when the party had wound down and they were alone again in their room, Xander held Kaitlyn close. They were older now, their bodies marked by years of hard work and the passage of time. But to him, she was still the most beautiful woman in the world. "Would you do it again?" he asked. "If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you still accept my offer that day, in a heartbeat? 1,000 times over, would you still stop? Every single time. You are my destiny, Kaitlyn, I truly believe that. And you are mine." More years passed. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their children. Grandchildren became teenagers and then adults. Great-grandchildren arrived, and Xander and Kaitlyn found themselves the patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family that called them blessed. Their hair turned fully silver. Their steps grew slower, but their love never dimmed. They still sat on the porch every evening, still held hands as they walked, still looked at each other with the same wonder they had felt decades ago. On a warm spring evening, when Xander was 62 and Kaitlyn was 59, they sat together in their favorite spot by the creek. The land around them was alive with new growth, and they could hear children's laughter from the direction of David's house. "It has been a good life," Xander said softly, "the best life." Kaitlyn leaned against him. "Thank you for giving it to me. Thank you for sharing it with me." "I love you, Kaitlyn, from that first day until forever." "I love you too, always and always." They sat there together as the sun set over the Texas hills, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something extraordinary. A desperate woman outside a tavern. A cowboy with a kind heart. A moment of grace that changed two lives forever. Their story would be passed down through generations, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the truth that sometimes the most beautiful lives grow from the hardest beginnings. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, their legacy living on in the land, in their descendants, in the very foundation of everything they had built together. But the real legacy was simpler than that. It was in the way they had loved each other fully and completely, without reservation or regret. It was in the family they had raised and the life they had lived. It was in the fact that a starving woman and a lonely cowboy had found each other in the vast wilderness of the American West and made a home together. And that, truly, was all that mattered.